te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atakura, he teo, he hoka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora. And other side, cease the winds from the west, cease the winds from the south, let the breeze blow over the land, let the breeze blow over the ocean, let the red-tipped dawn come with a sharpened ear, a touch of frost, a promise of a glorious day. And Chair, can I just end on this note? On Sunday at 5:45 a.m. in the morning, we all joined Piripi Smith down at the Star Compass to welcome Matariki. It's your last chance tomorrow at 6 a.m. in the morning, and on Friday to go down there and join with Piripi as they look out for Matariki and the constellations. Star Compass, Waitangi Park.
6 tomorrow?
6 a.m.
See you there.
See you there. Kia ora.
No, I'm making beauty. Straight in the diary.
Thank you, Perry. Did you do that on Sunday? Yeah.
5:45 a.m.
Yeah.
Last Sunday or this Sunday?
Sunday just gone.
Yeah, I heard, but
The papers.
So it's the
I would have come.
Didn't get an invite, did you?
No.
Just went out wild.
Already got your money.
It's all right. Matariki runs
And
for a
my
week.
energy, just because I helped make it happen. Don't worry. Anyway, let's move on. So yeah, welcome everyone. Now, are there any apologies for today? There are two. Is Hennyweis here with us in spirit, and there's an apology from Rick Barker. So can I have someone to move those apologies, please, Jeff? Will you second that? All in favour? Right. Thank you very much. Any notices? If there are no notices, we'll move on to item 2, conflict of interests, in reference to this agenda. There are none. We will move on. Has everyone filled their conflict of interest? Michelle, have you done that? No. Mike, have you put your conflict of interest register in?
We need to transfer them across, eh? Yep.
Yeah, if you could. So anyone who hasn't done that, if you just contact Leanne and just get that done, please. It's quite good to list anything you're involved in, just in case it comes up. So confirmation of the previous minutes on the 27th of May. This is where it gets tricky, you have to go back. Unconfirmed minutes, here we go. Okay, are there any comments on those? Any changes? None, therefore do we have a mover, please? Oh, sorry, Martin, I missed you.
I'll move.
You'll move?
Second.
Seconder. All those in favour of confirming the minutes? Aye. Thank you very much. Right, follow-up items. Item 3.
Chair, we've got a couple of items there that are on this agenda already, and in relation to the report requested by Councillor Barker that has been circulated. I just note the link in the agenda papers looks like it is non-operative, so we will circulate that as well. Okay. It's just not a hyperlink, even though it says click here. And then the regional drought resilience strategy work is underway on that, and I've had a discussion already this morning with Councillor Van Beek on that matter, and Mr Maxwell will be speaking with him about that further.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on that? Otherwise, we will move to item 5, which is significant. Oh, we move to receive those, please, the previous item. Jeff, you'll move to receive.
Yep.
We'll second it. All those in favour of receiving those follow-ups? Aye.
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 Thank you very much. Significant organisational activities.
Chair, we'll take this as read and not go through it one by one, but if I could just respond to the question that has been asked on the agenda papers by Api Tapani in relation to an advisor for the Tangata Whenua reps of the Regional Planning Committee. We're still awaiting a proposal from the RPC around his replacement. So we did leave that with the co-chairs for advice on the preference going forward. So
Thank you.
we're happy to take that matter forward once we've got some advice.
Thank you, James. Sheriff?
I've got a question. Under people and capability and health and safety, you've got point 16, currently 14 vacancies and so on, and you're looking to recruit 10 to 30 more candidates. I presume that's under through work and income?
Yes, and that does relate to those PGF proposals that we have in around regional parks and around fencing waterways.
Okay.
Potentially the numbers could be greater. It just depends on what funding is secured, and the expectation certainly is that funding will require us to source the workforce from the recently unemployed.
Okay, and from my experience, just as a bit of advice, you will need to build into that pastoral care. So if you're going to employ from this particular pool, you really need to have a wraparound support system to get outcomes. I think the outcomes will be fantastic if we can, as an organisation, to actually get from work and income people who've been made unemployed, young, maybe not so young. But my advice is you need to have additional funding to be able to actually do that wraparound. And that starts with even licences, car licences and so forth. Okay. These people come with life, and we can be really helpful by assisting them get onto that first step of the ladder. I think it's a great thing.
Look, we have a work broker from Work and Income that we're working with directly, and I'll ask the People and Capability team to engage him on that question and how we best provide that support.
If I could
Sure.
just add a point, we are actually in the process of scheduling an engagement with the Regional Commissioner and the work broker and the Regional Advisor with regards to this piece of work, so that we can ensure that the process is smooth. So that's in train at the moment.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I supplementary comment?
Yes, sir.
Same conversation. So, point 5 of the current item, which talks about the regional business grouping, I'd just like to signal that great work that's been happening there, but I'm also receiving messages from our business community with this potential second wave. A lot of them have gone straight to panic. They managed to survive the first lockdown, but the thought of a second one is really starting to stress people out.
Yep.
So that whole pastoral component that Councillor Van Beek referred to in that kaupapa also really applies to this regional business grouping as well. They may not, because they're so busy doing the do, they may not immediately come and ask around the welfare needs. And so I'm just conscious that there's going to be a lot of our businesses who are glad to get past the first stage and are really concerned about the second stage, and I'm worried about the wellbeing impacts and flow-on effects. So in the same conversation with MST, if you could incorporate some concern or express that concern around what support is there to help our current business and business operators that may be looking at a second wave.
Yeah, if I can just add as well, many of the workshops that the RBP team are facilitating with providers are focused as much about business resilience as around workplace wellness and a sort of wide range of support. So it's not just around the business aspect, it's also around the people and taking care of them.
Cool.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Chair, if I could just draw Council's attention to two other matters. Under item number 29, which is the Provincial Growth Fund funding for Te Rahui Bridge at Lake Whakakī. The good news is that we now have the opportunity to align the rebuild of the bridge with the weir that was going to be constructed and is going to be constructed as part of the Freshwater Improvement Fund project. So there's an opportunity, I guess, for some synergies and potentially some savings of building one piece of infrastructure rather than two, which makes sense. So that's a good news story. And look, the other thing I just note is under the compliance commentary, we've got a couple of cases of where infringement notices to territorial authorities have been issued for the princely sum of $750, and when the Resource Management Amendment Bill is enacted, which is hopefully imminent within days, we will be able to lift those fines to more princely sum of $4,000, which might have a more deterrent effect for our non-compliant consent holders.
I did complain to the Minister that it was nowhere near enough. Just the cost of business. Any other questions?
Just one there to the CEO. I may have missed it, but the Waimarama track is that in there somewhere? It seemed to have slipped off.
Yes, so under number 69.
Oh, 69, sorry.
It says it's under Tamata Park, so that's the off-road section parallel
yes,
to Waimarama
yes.
Road.
Yep. Any progress?
Yes, so the construction side of things, I believe, is back underway, and there is a hui tonight in relation to...
No, not in relation to this.
No, well, in relation to the wider part.
There was a
piece of that.
hui on this, and it's all consultation is finished. It is in action. It's both Mike and I attended a hui at the Tai Whenua, and this is not related to that Te Ranga Park. This is totally separate, and it's all go.
All good. Oh, great news. Okay, thanks.
Chris, anything to add on the
Confirm that it is on track to be constructed and it's due to be finished by that Christmas time. So obviously we'll wait for the wet weather to disappear.
Is you complaining about wet weather now?
Activity, but it is on track. All the approvals are in place, and Hastings District Council are leading and delivering that project.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Neil, and then Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I've got a question in regard to paragraph 58, which is Te Whanganui Arutu Ahuriri Estuary. The report there is the source model has been developed, modelling flow paths, etc. there, and it leads to a report on the website, but when you go into it, that's the Hawke's Bay Marine Coastal Group partnership, collaboration, and I'm just curious, have I got the wrong link there, or is that the report that it's referring to?
I'll defer to Mr Maxwell, but I do note that there was another report noted in here for the Marine and Coastal Group that had a link to it, and it's possible that the two hyperlinks have got mixed up.
I can't get the link to open, so we will circulate the report separately just to save that confusion.
Great, thank you. As a sort of follow on from that, in terms of the source model that's referred to in paragraph 58, is that the same land action plan? Is that the basis of the land action plan, and is there a land action plan associated with the source model report?
The answer is no, they're not related. The source model is to deal with the sources and flows of contaminants across a water perspective. In time it will relate to managing land activities, but there is no land plan linked to the source model.
Can I ask, is there one due? Is the land action plan something in train that's being produced?
There is an operational action plan that's being developed currently between statutory agencies that will be reported to a committee once it's available.
People can't hear.
I wouldn't call it a land action plan necessarily. It's a broad action plan across a range of things. Not the same.
It might be useful if YouTube folks come up, because the public can't hear you speaking.
Chair, look, through you, as I understand it, the land action plan that was referenced in a previous paper to council, probably a couple of years ago now, has effectively morphed into this operational plan, which is coming back to council. Is that do I understand?
Well, the intention was to have an integrated catchment management plan for the catchment that sits in the domain of Te Komiti to manage or for us to partner with in the creation of. What we're working on at the moment is an operational plan that pulls together the activities of the statutory agencies operating across the catchment. It will allow for greater visibility, coordination and collaboration around our work and alignment of objectives between the statutory agencies. So that's work in progress right now, and we're close to concluding that. There is a separate and broader piece of work, which is this integrated catchment plan, action plan, call it what you will, that sets out an overarching vision and looks to bring in a wider collaboration with the community in general.
Can you just indicate when that might be due, Ian? What's the time frame?
Which one, sorry?
Or both of them, actually.
Well, so I was hoping to get the action plan to the EICC next week.
Oh, okay,
It's
it's
going to be
that imminent.
It's. I think we're going to miss that deadline. It'll be with you within a month.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
Just have-
Oh, it's Martin, sorry.
That's right. Just one, Liz. Morning, Liz. Just an update on the Tukituki catchment consents. I see some good progress there with 130 pre-applications being lodged. How's it all working? Have you got a sense on how many people might have missed the pre-application opportunity?
Yes.
Yeah.
So our estimate, and it is an estimate, we're not sure the exact number of consents or pre-applications we should be expecting, simply because some are lodged not just by, under ownership rather than just, potentially property boundaries. But we estimate that's about half of what we need. So as from the beginning of July, we'll be starting, our compliance team will be taking over the follow-ups.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one, probably, I'm not sure to who. I see we've got an infringement notice against Hastings for discharge. Where is that stream? Tikahika?
McCarty Street.
Is that, well,
In Havelock North.
it's in Havelock.
It's the one that runs, if you're driving up McCarty Street towards Tamata Peak, it's in behind the houses on the left-hand side between Heralworth and those houses.
Oh, crikey. No wonder you had a infringement notice. Okay, thanks. Any other?
Doesn't smell though.
Okay, it was an accident, but anyway. Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, do we have someone to move that we receive this paper, please? I won't go back to you. Oh, you're back to them. Will will move this time. Sheriff will second. All those in favour?
Judy Sheriff. Aye.
All right, thank you very much. So, call for minor items not on the agenda. Do we have any minor items not on the agenda? Thanks, guys. You can go back to work now. They're clean as mustard to do that. Okay, no minor items. I'm just wondering, Mike, whether we don't say we're having a hui tonight on Te Ronga might. Okay, I'll talk about that.
So you make that a minor item?
I'll make that a minor item.
Thank you.
One minor item. Okay, then we thank you very much. We will move to decision items, and we have our guests from Hawke's Bay Tourism. If you guys can come up to the table, I'd appreciate that. Welcome. It's been a bit of a rough time for you guys. So,
Need a holiday.
we need a vacation. Yeah, certainly the sharp edge of the COVID situation, the results of COVID. So we're looking forward to your report today, and I thought it was really well presented report. So thanks very much for that. So George, we'll hand over to you.
Kia ora tātou, nei rata mihi, kua hui mai nei tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Thanks very much for the opportunity of talking to you today. Look, I think it's fair to say that the tourism industry has gone through the most spectacular change of fortune that any of us have ever experienced. And I think that the industry's ever experienced, and it's approximately 100 years of development in New Zealand. The one take I have from all of this is it's something that we've experienced over the many years that I've been involved in tourism, is it's an incredibly resilient industry. And that resilience is starting to show through again. But we've got a long road to go. I'm involved in many different businesses in Wellington, Rotorua, Kapiti, that are, as well as Hawke's Bay in terms of my various roles. And it's variable, but everybody's adapting very quickly to the new reality. And I describe it as this: the tourism industry now is essentially fighting for 50% of the market that it once had. And that's our task. When we start to focus on what that means for this region, number one, we're more fortunate than many. Tourism hasn't been as dominant an element of our economic environment as it has for some other parts of the country. Also, our predominant market is domestic, so we're fortunate in that regard as well. There's a bit of a two-edged sword in that, of course, because domestic is now the only market that anybody's got, and I think our hopes of a trans-Tasman bubble solving some of tourism's problems is fast receding for this year anyway. So what we're faced with is an incredibly competitive market for the domestic tourist, and we're up for that, frankly. So our actions to date have been, first of all, respond to the activity, or respond to the crisis, and that was to, shall I say, circle the wagons of the industry and make sure that our own industry here understood what this meant, that the communication channels were strong, and they were able to access the sorts of government support that's available, and that's obviously been wage subsidies. There's more coming, and making sure that as an industry here we're well connected and well able to respond to the opportunities and help that's available. The second thing was to survey the landscape that we're going to be dealing in and decide where we should go, and the third thing was to take action. Now, we started that action about 3 or 4 weeks ago. We, as you probably know, in one of the sessions we ran, we determined that the best market for the Hawke's Bay to focus on in the domestic market was Wellington. There are a lot of regions active in the Auckland market, but we were really the first to hit the ground running in Wellington. We've had that Hey Wellington campaign going for some time now. We're also fortunate we're able to take advantage of incredibly good media rates, because at that particular time the media landscape was looking pretty desperate as well, and so we've had probably a 50% extension to the sort of reach you would normally get. So that's been working well for us. The next stage of what we need to do is look pretty strongly at phase 2, and that's going to be in the spring break. We see that as the next time that we'll start to ramp up Hawke's Bay's awareness and the campaign. And associated with that is, I suppose the good news, the government's come on board with funding for regional tourism organisations. And so they've recognised that there needs to be more support at this level. We've been classified as a strategic tourism asset, which is, I think, the first time I've heard us described as that. And we are the response mechanism for this region and its economy. So there's up to $700,000 available for us through that fund. A word of caution, subject to our funding not being reduced by the region. We didn't write that in there, but that was the statement. And clearly what they want to see happen with that is it actually amplifies and extends the reach and impact of what we're doing. And so as we stand at the moment, we're just sorting out the details of that particular fund, and we'll be putting our application in to make sure we get every last dollar that we're entitled to. And then we'll start our marketing campaign. So my own assessment of the position we're in, that with that funding, with the funding we've been able to develop within our own annual budget, we're reasonably well placed over the next 12 years to maintain a strong campaign presence in the markets that we want to be in. I do say again, look, it's not going to be easy. There's lots of people that want to eat our lunch, but we have a strong domestic product offering, and we're going to be doing everything we can to make sure that we don't lose any of that share. And you will see in the KPIs, I think, that we've put forward, is that our aim is to make sure that we at least maintain or improve on the market share that we've had out of the domestic tourism market in the past. So that's just a few opening comments. You obviously got our quarterly report, but I'd just like to hand over to Hamish to sort of embellish a few of those elements, if you wouldn't mind.
Right.
Hamish.
Thanks, George. Kia ora tātou. I'm really proud of the work that we've been able to do in a reasonably short period of time. We've been in the Wellington market now for probably around 4 weeks, And anecdotally, our businesses here in Hawke's Bay have received a significant number of Wellingtonians, of people from the southern North Island who were very aware that they had a desire to come to Hawke's Bay for what we've called a vacation. We've had wonderful support from our council partners, we've had wonderful support from our stakeholders and members. We have had feedback that hotels have been tracking a lot better than forecast, and not only that, but they haven't actually had to enter into significant discounting as other regions have had to do. And in fact, many have been able to keep, and in some instances either also increase rates, which I think has been superb. We have had comments of some retailers having their best days or best weekends in more than 12 months of normal business operation. So these are the types of things that we're getting fed back to us that I think point to the success of our campaign, and also the success of our region as a really strong domestic destination, which I'm really, really thrilled with. But that campaign is coming to a close. So as George said, we need to be back into the market, reaffirming our position, reiterating all of our messages, and spring and pushing the wonderful events that we have and that we will have. And this additional funding from the government will allow us to do that. We are able to apply for up to $700,000, and so we're developing that application now. In fact, it has to be into MB at the end of next week, and we were just in Wellington yesterday learning of some of the conditions that there will be attached to that application. But really the focus for us, the best thing that we can deliver to our businesses here are visitors. Are people. So the lion's share of this application fund needs to be put towards marketing so that we actually have the ability to stay strong in the markets that we have been in, but also potentially expand our message in what is going to be a highly competitive arena. And again, look, I'd just like to perhaps also thank Hawke's Bay Regional Council for their continued support, and also support of the campaign that we were able to share with you and get into market really early. Your support in that through the mayoral forum also, and then our separate meetings with the various councils. Without your support, you know, it wouldn't have been what it has been. So we're very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Holmes. Thank you, George. Questions? Michelle, and then Mike.
Kia ora. I'm just looking at your KPIs, and one of the measurements is develop Māori tourism, and the performance is a discussion group brought together to discuss. Who are those organisations that you're talking to?
Kia ora, Michelle. So people that we were working with in the first instance were Māori business owners or Māori tourism businesses who were members of Hawke's Bay Tourism at the time that we were developing that. So people like Napier Māori Tours, Waimarama Tours, Archie's, Bunker, so companies that were already part of Hawke's Bay Tourism. Now, that has the potential to change as we've currently got a membership holiday that we've offered. We've offered free membership of Hawke's Bay Tourism, so that hopefully we're able to bring a lot more tourism businesses who are not currently members of Hawke's Bay Tourism into our wider group, and that will hopefully also include Māori tourism businesses.
Okay, just a supplementary. So is there any kōrero amongst New Zealand Māori tourism, with New Zealand Māori tourism? Because is Toro still on the representative for?
In August, on 20th of August, we actually have a meeting with New Zealand Māori tourism, just to make sure that that what we're doing is aligned to the values of New Zealand Māori tourism, and that's what we want to have, is make sure that we've got that national alignment happening.
I just noted that I spoke to one of the managers of Kaurangi Māori Dance Theatre, and been here over 30 years, and they're a Māori tourism operator as well. The founder put up the carvings in the Hastings Council by the library, and just was interested whether they were involved or not, and they said they hadn't been, but I understand you have to be a member. So they're a member, I think, of New Zealand Māori Tourism, Hawke's Bay Tourism, but not, yeah, so I'm just, how wide is that engagement?
We've been attempting to widen our net as much as we possibly can. You know, one of the, if there was a benefit of COVID, it would be that we have probably, at Hawke's Bay Tourism, and allowing not only a free membership for a limited period of time, but with our communication channels, we have actually been able to communicate far more widely and also bring in partners from the various councils and also information centres to get out to the wider industry and say, hey, this offer is available. And I think we have seen, and Facebook is a good example of that, you know, at the sort of the, as we were just going into the alert levels, we had something like 170 people that we were talking to that were following us on Facebook, and it's now over 350. So I think that we were recognised much more as being a source of information and communications regarding tourism right across Hawke's Bay.
Kia ora, George. So, George, you spoke about the fact that Hawke's Bay Tourism has been recognised as a strategic asset in the tourist industry. How important was the fact that we're Hawke's Bay Tourism versus, say, Hastings on its own, Napier on its own, or Central and so forth? That has been a discussion in the past in regards to the actual makeup of the tourism body.
Yeah, exactly. In a number of forums I've been at, it's been made very clear that they expect this area to act as a region, particularly when it comes to funding like that. And when I say a strategic asset, what had come out of that is that they had determined that regional tourism organisations generally within New Zealand were seen as being a strategic asset at this time in terms of fighting the response to the virus, or the recovery from the virus impact. So,
And my second question is in regards, so you spoke about the fact that, you know, tourism at the moment is local. And as you spoke about, we have a number of local icon events that take place on a regular basis. What is Hawke's Bay Tourism's intention about promoting that beyond the normal realms of what we might have done in the past, or supporting those various events?
okay, I think I'll just get Hamish to talk through the event platform that they're looking at now, particularly for spring, which is quite extensive.
Certainly the additional funding will allow us to go back into those markets now that we've established that concept a little bit more of a Hawke's Baycation, and you may recall that initially we were comparing Hawke's Bay to some of those international holidays that people were unable to undertake. We don't need to compare ourselves. We think in the second iteration what we'll be able to do is actually, now that people are also able to attend events, really co-promote. So we're actually hoping that through partnership where, and I'll use the Arts Festival as an example, that we would hope that we can take to them that concept of Hawke's Bay and within that framework put in Arts Festival or the Central Hawke's Bay Spring Fling, our upcoming fork, various other events to co-promote those out of the region. So where they were doing those promotions out of the region, hopefully we can build upon that jointly to make our funds go further together and attract people into the region.
Thank you for that, Hamish.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to George raised the question, George, of this is an unprecedented time for tourism, and I understood you were looking at an assessment of the impacts on the sector, if you like, category by category within the sector, and we've had obviously reports of widespread unemployment resulting from the pandemic. So my question is, what is your assessment of the sector look like? Where does it hurt the most, and what strategies are you looking at to support those parts of the sector that need support to preserve their presence?
clearly the sector that's hurt the most is those that were heavily reliant on the international visitor market. So, I'll give you an example. Two businesses that I'm actively involved in, Hobbiton and Tapuia and Rotorua, their staff numbers have gone from 300 to 400 down to less than 50. So that's where the impact is. They're looking at volumes of visitors reducing from over 500,000 down to under 100,000 a year.
I was more meaning the Hawke's Bay.
Just trying to indicate that the issue we have here is not anywhere near as severe as that. So I think what you're going to see in the tourism industry is some quite big redundancy issues and business failures in some areas as we move into the next few months. Hawke's Bay, on the other hand, doesn't have those sorts of large-scale, high-volume group tourism things, and we're better placed to weather that storm. Now, undoubtedly, there'll be some job losses through that, but nowhere near of the significance that we're going to see elsewhere.
But what does your analysis look like? Yes. What reports have you got that tell us where the pain is and whether there's an opportunity to provide some level of support for those sectors?
The clear support that the industry want and tell us is they want visitors. And so the prime activity that we should be engaged in is getting people to visit this region. That's the support they want.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
My question was, what is your analysis telling you as to where the pain actually is, which sectors are involved? I mean, can we offer rate rebates to some properties? What do we do?
George, can I just add on to, as a sort of supplementary, so it might help, because I think what Neil's driving at is, when we look out there, anecdotally, you can't get a booking in our flashiest restaurants. You can't. All the restaurants in Havelock North are full at the moment. There's traffic jams in Havelock North. You can't. The queues at Mitre 10 are longer than they've ever been. So, where in Hawke's Bay, there must be some tourism business in Hawke's Bay that are really suffering, but you can't get a B&B, a high-end one. You can't. They're all booked. So where are we taking a hit in Hawke's Bay, and how are we dealing with that?
Right.
That's
Okay, well, look, perhaps let me focus on a couple of areas. One is obviously there are some businesses who focus primarily on the 80 days of cruise visits. So those businesses are hurting, and some of them will have gone into hibernation, and some of them are going to need to relook at their business. And the word pivot is being used in so many places. So through our workshops that we are running, like we've got 13 workshops coming up. One of them tomorrow is about environmental sustainability. We're hoping that we can help some of those businesses to strengthen their position and perhaps look at how they might be able to pivot to a domestic market. Some of these are smaller operators, and we're also aware that through our partnership with Business Hawke's Bay that there are also funds available for association with the regional business partners to help those businesses really look at and refocus on their business. And we understand that there will be more funds with the tourism focus coming through MB to the regional business partners that we can help move those businesses to. Because through our surveys, many of our businesses have not said we're doing really, really poorly. Many of them have come through, as tourism businesses do, as small businesses do, and said we're still really, really optimistic. At level 2, we had events businesses that were really struggling. Our take on it right now, from talking to our hotels that are busy in the weekends, is that a really wonderful opportunity is that the weekdays are still really lumpy. Sure, some of the corporates are coming back, but we actually would really like to have business events, meetings, conferences coming through. So we're going to be taking some of the funds that we're going to be getting from government to be a lot more assertive in that business events marketing, and try to get more conferences and more associations here having those group meetings to just try to build up the weekdays a little bit more, because those are the areas that are hurting.
Yeah, I guess I still don't have a really good feel for what's happening in the tourism sector, because we get an anecdotal view, which is all we can get really. And I think Neil's alluding to that. If we can get a really good feel, like is there a big player like Hobbiton that's really hurting in Hawke's Bay. I mean, I guess the backpackers must be hurting because there's not a lot. But are they? I don't know. But we need to know, because we need to know where we would be able to help in any way that we could.
Well, I think, you know, again, from the surveys that we've been conducting and through those lockdown periods is, you know, our businesses have gone from, other than the backpackers and perhaps other than some motels that had government-related business through MSD, through WINS, etc. You know, we had properties that were simply unable to operate. We had events that are unable to operate.
Events would be it.
Yeah. And that has changed. That has changed as we've gone to level one. So again, these businesses are scrambling to get visitors back, to reinvent themselves. We saw it with the hospitality sector, that, you know, they went from delivery setups, they went from that to social distancing, and now there's no social distancing. And those wage subsidies, some of them have been unable to apply for wage subsidy extensions because actually they've been doing better than that threshold of 40%. So, you know, we are asking our industry, but it is changing all the time as more visitors arrive. Again, the best thing we can do is give them customers, and that's why we need to do the marketing.
I think to add to that, and you don't have those large businesses that are suddenly in dire straits. You've got some changes going on. The cruise industry, for example, is going to have an impact on retail, particularly in this city. And there were some tourism businesses that fed off the cruise opportunity. But I think the reality of that is that they don't have an easy pivot to anywhere else anyway. So I know the government's going to have to make some pretty hard choices soon about what are considered to be survivable businesses in this situation. And I think this region's quite lucky in that it will lose some, but not a lot. The other thing that's happened is a lot of the wineries have closed down their cellar doors, particularly for winter. And so people are making those sorts of economies that they need to do. Our hope is that they reopen because we need the product to attract people here as we get into the spring and summer period. But the real issue is we need people to come to the Bay, and that's where all of the focus should be.
We agree with that.
That's what we do, and I think that should be the focus of the Regional Council too.
Okay, are there any more? Yes, Craig.
Thanks. Thanks, George and Hamish. Just to acknowledge, I think it's very important to see that tourism in Hawke's Bay, given the metrics we have in the report here, was actually going pretty well prior to COVID. I think it's just very important that core business before COVID actually was going very well, and the only really thing we have is that there's these financial numbers coming through from credit cards and FPOS and things like that to see how everything's tracking. So I think it's very important for you to keep reporting those to us. Thanks very much. And also the fact that the flexibility of Hawke's Bay, of yourselves, sorry, to adjust and pull in a marketing program for particularly Lower North Island at pretty short notice, and pulling in some of the incredible marketing talent we have in Hawke's Bay who all got behind the wheel. I think we should acknowledge that, because at the end of the day, domestic tourism in New Zealand means simply Hawke's Bay is in competition with every other region in New Zealand for those visitors, which we need to fill our cafes, et cetera, as we've just been talking about. So all speed to you, and thanks for doing the pretty good job, I think, that you're doing in these pretty tough circumstances. One thing in particular, though, I'd just like to, if you could take a bit more depth. I think you said you were just down with MB the other day with that criteria around this 700K, and everyone in the country must be in a similar situation. That's fine, but the importance from central government's point of view of a regional tourism organisation, their preferred model for funding, for accountability, transparency, etc. That seems to be coming through loud and clear from the minister's announcements recently and on the webinars that they've been holding. Does that still hold true? And any further information you can give us around the criteria as you see it of the 700K that you're applying for? And is that an annual, by the way, or is it over 1 or 2 years or 1 year?
It's for 1 year, so $20.2 million to be shared across the 31 regional tourism organisations. The conditions of funding, there are largely three areas in that. One is in the area of destination management, one is in the area of product development, and one is in the area of destination marketing. Product development is something that we will also be, we have to look at all of those three areas. Product development will be useful in some regions where there is, and has been traditionally, limited visitor product. We, however, here are very, very fortunate that we've got loads of great reasons to come here. And again, hence the focus on marketing, that we need people to fill it, to make sure that we retain those businesses. And yes, I think that this is a very, very strong indication from the Minister of Tourism and from government that at a regional level, tourism is not only important, but the regional tourism organisations as being the coordinators of that messaging, as the representatives of the sector. Tourism New Zealand has normally, as an organisation, simply had an outward focus, simply had an international focus, they haven't looked at domestic tourism since the late 1980s. So they've been out of this space for a very long time. And although the Tourism New Zealand's given a little bit of a job and some funds to come up with a nationwide campaign, there is the realisation from government that each region still needs to look after themselves, because each region is completely different in a tourism context, has a different reliance based on where they're located, based on their amenities. Some have cruise ports, others don't. Some have got significant hotels, some are resorts, some have international, more. So that is why this one-off recognises that actually regional tourism organisations are the best ones to manage additional funds to help the sector.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, we see that there are some definitions within it that we will be able to apply relevant programs to each of those, particularly sort of development of the food and wine story around Hawke and those sorts of things. There's lots of product development opportunities there. And also to clarify, there are 3 tiers of funding for regional tourism organisations, and we fit the mid-tier at 700,000. If you were at Queenstown, I think they get $1 million, did they?
1 million.
1 million. So, that's a very...
Thank you. I'm going to go to Heniwai and then back to you, Api, and I'd like to wind it up then because we've got a huge agenda today. So, Heniwai, you're on, and I need a way
Kia ora koutou. Kia ora George, kia ora Hamish, kia ora tātai. Just 2 questions for our guests. The first being, could you tell us more about the timing of the vacation campaign and how that compares to other regions in terms of getting a campaign out the gate for this domestic spend fight? So that's my first question.
Yep. So we, Auckland came out with a sort of a small campaign saying that don't forget us, effectively, within the first sort of weeks of the alert, but have yet to actually come up with any other campaign. And so we were effectively, Taupō has come out with a campaign. We're aware that Wanganui has just come out with a campaign, Dunedin also, but effectively Hawke's Bay was the first in the market with any significant campaign, and also something that was specifically targeted, obviously targeted towards Wellington. So, we are regarded as effectively being first out the gate.
Thank you.
Awesome. And the second question is, could you tell us a bit more about the upcoming spring and summer events that Hawke's Bay is contributing to?
So just Hawke's Bay has a great reputation for terrific events. So they include, with a focus on spring, we've got Spring Racing Carnival, we've got the Spring Fling, which we do in conjunction with Central Hawke's Bay. That's a Hawke's Bay Tourism owned event for focus on Central Hawke's Bay. We've got the Arts Festival, we've got obviously Fork Food and Wine Classic, but there are plenty of other events coming in and around that. And also for the next iteration of the campaign, thinking about next year, which will be around autumn again as we start going into a lower season. You know, we've got the marathon coming up in September. There is so much on. So those events that we identified that are the ones that can strongly bring people from out of the region into the region will be the ones that we will hopefully be able to partner with the best.
Thank you.
Awesome. Hey, thank you. And thanks to your staff as well. You're pretty full on.
Thanks
Thank
anyway.
you.
Right, last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your report and the work you guys have been doing, especially the quick response, as Councillor Foss mentioned, the adaptability and speed at which you responded to try and grow a space to generate opportunities for our tourism sector here. Is just a pat on the back. Well done, team. But as you present your report here today, my role here at this committee is around ensuring that the interests of iwi and mana whenua across Hawke's Bay are in some way considered in the information that passes across this table. So as I read your report, and I'm not greatly familiar with the history between Hawke's Bay tourism and Māori tourism. I know they're both fiercely independent organisations that are looking to work towards achieving ultimately the same aspirational outcomes, but are struggling with how to start that relationship off. That's, as an outsider, that's my impression. That sort of brings me to the report and how you've mentioned that we've been identified as a strategic region. We are being profiled to, well, Hawke's Bay tourism has been profiled to lead some significant change for our region going forward. You mentioned a $700,000 potential investment into that strategy. You also mentioned that you're not meeting with iwi until August. So I'm wondering, how do you build a strategy? And I'm not expecting, again, acknowledging the challenges and the relationships between these different organisations. And as a Māori working for Māori and non-Māori organisations, I get it. But I'm just wondering how you're planning to build a strategy to grow product development and generate interest outside of our region when there doesn't appear to be any interaction with a whole component of our catchment. How are you planning to address that before August? Tough one, but that's why I'm here, guys.
Matariki's on your door.
Can I help?
Yeah,
please do, because that's a stink question.
Well, I think we have Heniwai and Charles on that tourism, so perhaps we will go to Heniwai.
So you're mostly right with your comments here, Api. So first of all, New Zealand Māori tourism, we wouldn't say is iwi. First of all, they are another organisation that that we can align our strategies to, but I wouldn't call them iwi. So that's who we're meeting the 20th of August. Another thing is that Hawke's Bay tourism and Hawke's Bay Māori tourism have quite different roles and objectives that each board meets. So for Hawke's Bay tourism, we look at the marketing, promoting of the region, and we assist our members with marketing and developing themselves in terms of trading and marketing, not so much product development. I mean, it is up to them what experience, like my business, Napier Māori Tours, what type of experience I want to provide. And if there are marketing elements or support systems that Hawke's Bay Tourism can help with, that's who you can go to. Whereas Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism wants to help with that product development from day dot, including business cases. And so we're in different phases of where our support is for any tourism experience. And in terms of that strategy that's in the KPIs, that is the group of members within our organisation that feel they are either Māori or provide a Māori type experience, and what support they want from Hawke's Bay Tourism as members to help them along their marketing journey, because that's a big job in itself. So I hope that gives you better context of the difference and how we've come up with that strategy. If you want to take it broader, all the way back to product development, that's something that probably sits best with Matariki and Hamish's role on Matariki. So I'll let Hamish talk to that.
Certainly, and from a Matariki perspective, it's about making sure that as events that can bring people in, that there is an awareness of those events, and that's what we've been asking which events are occurring in Matariki so that we can share that online to our followers on Facebook, to our markets from out of town, so that hopefully people can come in and share in those Matariki events.
Oh, sorry, Rick.
No.
Just in relation to Matariki, so the iwi, they run a whole lot of Matariki celebrations from Wairoa to Wairarapa, and that's, just talking about spring and summer. Matariki's God's on our doorstep now and all those events. And another national Māori event is Waiata Māori Music Awards, which pulls in artists from all around the country and people. That's why I'm saying you're sort of missing some of the big organisations there. And one more thing, the Māori tourism doesn't receive the regional council's money. It's just a point that has to be made. That some of those people that are sitting in Māori tourism aren't sitting in here, so they're not benefiting from ratepaid money.
No, they're not. And we've had that debate. I've got to say that this debate's gone on and on and on, and we have the division. We do have a division because we have a very strong protagonist in Maori tourism who advocates strongly for them. But not necessarily at a national level, because I've talked to the national people and they're quite happy with the way it is. And a lot of the tourist operators, the Tangata Whenua tourist operators, are also very happy. So we had a really big, before you got involved, and it's just going to be a perennial issue. Because some of the biggest events that we have in our rohi are events that are driven by the iwi, like Matatini, which is probably one of the biggest events we've ever had in Hawke's Bay, and of course those music awards. And I think our tourism guys are conscious of that. I don't think, and the funding we give is basically marketing funding for everybody. So, this debate will continue, that's for sure.
But just the Matariki, on the point of Matariki, I was involved with Te Rangi Huata when it first came out and people laughed at us. And now it's a national event, Matariki.
Absolutely.
So I have been in that arena for years.
I could just reiterate, we represent all businesses in here, and where we get one part of the organisation, namely Hawke's Bay Maori Tourism, who won't talk to us even despite what we try to do, it's very hard.
It's
as simple as that. We're here to represent every business in this region, and we do that to our darndest, but there's a roadblock.
There's a roadblock. Okay, look, we're going to move on because we've got a lot of big. So, can I have someone to move that that we accept the recommendation, receive and consider the items in the tourism? So, was that you, Craig? Okay, thank you very much. Who got a seconder?
I'm doing my shoelaces.
Thanks, Charles. Come to the rescue. I don't really know I can on the thing, can she? Anyway, we have a move and a second. All those in favour? Aye. So I want to thank you two gentlemen. As I said before, it was the sharp end of you were definitely the sharp end. And anecdotally, it just seems like we're recovering in a big part of the sector. But, that's why we could take a little bit of a drop before we get into the spring. And we need to know who's vulnerable out there. So thanks for all the work you're doing. It's great. I've been on a couple of your webinars and it's been really good.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for all your support around this table. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. The item 8, strategic plan adoption. So we've been through this, but I see. Oh, who's going to do this? Marianne's not with us.
This is Tom.
Oh, Tom, you're going to do it. Oh, well done, Tom.
Marianne will be pleased to hear that she's not having to do this.
That's her name on the report.
So, Desiree.
Desiree.
Yeah. So look, I'll be really quick. So we'll just take the paper as read. Just point to the fact this is a refresh of the strategic plan. The process that we've been through has been a number of engagements with both council and the Māori committee in terms of looking at the document, making some changes, bringing back. Then we had COVID in the middle, and we've infused some aspects of our climate smart recovery framework, which I think was also, by recollection, presented to a group that combined the Maori Committee and representatives from the partners, and then it's been back to council for a final look, and some of the changes from that just noted in paragraph 7 of the report. So I'm just happy to take it as read. I just note there was some with council, there was some discussion around, just following on from the presentation we just had around the sort of economic uncertainty that we're in, and there is some commentary in the strategic plan and the 2020 refresh and the economy that just does speak to some of the uncertainty that we're facing, and really this document is very helpful for guiding the very heavy lifting that is coming up and work that needs to be done through the long-term plan. So happy to take questions.
Okay, we've thrashed us to death, but do we have any questions?
I was going to move.
Who's going to move?
Second.
And we have a mover and a seconder. Who wish to speak?
Just very briefly, Mr. Chair, the document itself speaks for itself more loudly each time it's produced, and so water and land, biodiversity, infrastructure and services very clearly articulated in the document. With the focus on climate change is clearly there. The piece that I particularly liked in this was the focus on the coastal marine area. Pleased to see that as achieving a higher priority than it has in the past, and very happy to move this. I think one thing though we need to do is keep focusing back to the document over time. The strategic plans seem to get lost in the midst of the fog and the smoke from the Hiratonga. We need to...
It'll be all over soon, Neil, don't worry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, look, we're very happy to be moving this, the adoption of the strategic plan.
Can I just
Yes, certainly, Martin.
Everything Neil said. Can I just, I guess, highlight the water security emphasis within the strategic plan is something that's very important to me, and it's great to see those particular words being employed. Equally, the dominant and complete infusion of climate change through all aspects of it, I think that's very, very important. Another reason I support this document. I note that we have undertaken in here to take a leadership role in the region becoming net carbon zero by 2050. I'm very keen to see us promote that through the way we plan the future of this region, through our policy and team and policy development and a future regional policy statement. That is a really strong way we can take a leadership position as a regional council, and again I'm fully backing it for that reason, but with that in mind. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Martin. Any other speakers? That's good, right. We have mover and seconder to essentially to adopt the strategic plan, which we've done an enormous amount of work on. All those in favour? Aye. Against? It's adopted. Thank you very much. Now, look, I want to move to item 17 because Ian is with us. And what's that?
Close.
Tom was just acknowledging this was a performance KPI for him this year.
Is there a bonus?
So you're shouting smoke over here. 13 and 17.
13 is the decision item that Ian's here for.
Okay. 13 and 17.
And then 17, yeah.
Okay, then that's right. We'll do, I thought 13. We'll go to 13. So Ian, if you can sit up there. 13 is the disaster relief 53, so it'll be useful to have Ian here for that. But who's leading? Bronda was leading that.
Ian's going to
Yeah, I'll look after it.
You will speak to it all. Okay, so it's a decision item, Ian, so you can speak to it, and then we'll do this, and then we'll move straight to your other report.
So, councillors, this is pretty straightforward. It's really just the Disaster Relief Trust, which was established by all of the councils as part of the CDM group. And this really is just to exempt it from the requirements of being a council CCO. So the reporting requirements for CCO are out of proportion with the nature of the activities of the trust. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions?
Just Gordon, thanks very much.
Craig.
Just who, except the proposal, just who does have visibility over the organisation or the accountability side? Where does that channel back up?
So through the trustees, which is all of the mayors and the chair of the regional council.
How would the public see that?
So there has to be an annual meeting, which is part of a public meeting, which is part of the and a report done on the trust's activities for the year. That has to be done yearly. I think it's also part of the annual report as well, from memory.
Okay, we'll just, if that can be just, obviously it'll be notified because there'll be quite an awareness because significant funds have gone into that. So if this makes that process easier, that's fine, but visibility and transparency, I think, will be valued.
Is that why we're receiving and considering?
Correct. There is a decision required.
Yeah, there's a decision required. Any other questions for Ian on this paper?
I might be off, but I noticed that the LGAs, so the mayors and recs. I'm just wondering, because we're supposed to be partners, is there opportunity for tangata whenua?
Iwi chair turns up. It's mayors and chairs.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that in
there. No.
Yep.
because
only
they were
recent.
heavily involved in the civil defence throughout the space.
Yes. So there is an opportunity within the deed, the trust, for the trustees to appoint to appoint new trustees as part of an emergency. So this is really just a holding organisation, so that.
No, I understand that because it's still there. It's still there.
Still there. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay.
Okay. Do we have a mover to move that? And just so there's got to be a decision item later. We are receiving and considering. The mover. Thank you very much, Craig. Seconder. No, Neil. He's got his hand up. Neil, will you second this? A second. Thank you very much. Craig, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you.
Neil? No. Anyone else wish to speak? Otherwise, I'll move the motion. All those in favour? Aye. It's carried. Thank you very much. So we'll go to item 17 while we've got Ian here so he can get back to work. A report on your civil defence report, Ian.
Yeah, so this is basically a report on the last group joint committee meeting back in the beginning of June. But attached to that, I've just included our initial results-based accountability report on the COVID-19 response. What you've got there is very focused on what the community saw as to the pointy end of the stick, I suppose. There was a whole lot of other things that happened in the background over the COVID-19 response. So just to give you a sort of a flavour, the GECC or the Group Coordination Centre, which is in Hastings, that was activated for 79 days in total from sort of mid-March. We started work on this when the first sort of warnings became apparent back in February. So that's when we started looking at our plans, our pandemic plans. We had 57 consecutive days of being activated, so that was quite a significant period of time. Some days, particularly at the start, we were working for about 15 hours a day over 2 shifts, and then we reduced back to 1 shift of 10 hours a day. So there was 170 different staff involved, and those are staff from the Regional Council, Napier City Council and Hastings District Council, and a number of other people from various NGOs and other organisations as well. So we delivered, between ourselves and the food banks that we supported and worked with, there was around about 9,500 food parcels delivered across Hawke's Bay. Basically 4 days food for 4 people. And of those 1,600 were directly from the civil defence, and we were I suppose, the safety net for people that couldn't be assisted through the food banks or via the community. The rest of it is in this report, which is attached to the agenda, and I'm not going to go into the detail, but if you've got any questions, by all means.
Yeah, very good report, Ian. Thank you. Jareth.
Yes, first of all, congratulations on the folders that you use in your report. They're really good, especially on the first page.
that you?
They didn't get it, did they? No, that's fine. Okay, call abandonment rate seems to be very high, unless I've got the concept of abandonment wrong. Can you please explain?
Yeah, so obviously they went up and down, and so we had a certain manning level or staffing level for our call centre. When we had the ability to ramp that up, which we did, but it very much, like there were some things which we didn't expect, which was obviously just before Easter and just before Anzac Day, the numbers of calls went through the roof.
Okay.
So in terms of, yes, they were reasonably high, but considering we set that up from scratch in early March, I think that is pretty much acceptable. It was dealt with as we went through the response and as we learnt more and as we tweaked our systems and processes.
So obviously you've learned from that.
Yeah.
And then the subsequent question, Mr. Chair, is you seem to have the most complaints related to Fit for Now.
Yep.
What is Fit for Now? Is that the...
Sorry, yeah. So that was the system that we put in place on day one, essentially. So we knew that we had to be here, and that was the Fit for Future. So we had to come up with a process for dealing and a system for dealing with people who had issues, emergency welfare issues right at the start. So that was really just using existing systems, existing staff as best we could. It was very process driven, and so what we moved to though was a system which we called Fit for Future, which was for dealing with, because at that stage we thought we could be dealing with thousands of people. Okay, so we needed a system that could deal with thousands of people. The Fit for Now was really just up to 1,000 people.
Okay.
So that's how we sort of worked our way through it. Have a system that can work for up to 1,000 people in those first few weeks, based on existing systems, and then we needed to grow because this was a response which nobody had really thought about, the whole country in lockdown. So yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, Uppy.
Yeah.
Kia ora. First of all, what was it, 107 staff or 170?
70, yeah.
170 staff, 15 hours a day.
Well, sorry, that was over the length of the response.
Yes.
And some of them did, work.
I'm just acknowledging the amount of sweat and lack of sleep that you and the variety of staff would have received during that period. Nobody sees that, so I'll take a moment to acknowledge that and appreciate that input to our community. I'm particularly interested in what we learnt around reinforcing our networks, our communications, our rural areas. So COVID locked us down by choice. I locked myself in my whare for 4 weeks, so our infrastructure, our roading, our water, our power, our comms, all working fine. So under a COVID pandemic, it'd be great to see what we could learn around how we can, particularly for our more isolated areas where smaller numbers tend to slip through the gaps. From an iwi perspective, that is pretty critical, especially in our central Hawke's Bay, Wairau areas and up towards the ranges where we do have a higher population of Māori that are more rurally isolated. So I'm looking forward to when your team is able to bring a report back, not necessarily today, but I expect that there's a whole lot of learnings, and I'm sending a signal on behalf of iwi. We really want to know how can we reinforce the relationship between civil defence emergency and iwi response programs and the appropriate support mechanisms all the way through. We had a lot of learnings through that, and I'd be really grateful to see how your input with the Pouwhakarai and others on the GECC and that information as it comes back to iwi. So well done on the work that you have done. 99, you get 99 out of 100 from me, but I also get a number of iwi crying in my ear saying this didn't happen, and so really looking forward to when you're able to articulate those learning lessons for us as a region.
Sure.
Thank you, Api. Do we have someone to move that we receive this, please?
I'll move.
Thank you. Griff, seconded.
Neil had his hand up.
Neil. Next, you had a question. Anyway, it's hard for me to. I need a method where I can see if your hand's up. Do you know any questions?
No, I'll just no, thank you.
Okay. Sorry.
Well, I had a question, Mr. Chair.
Oh. Okay. Okay.
Happy
Neil.
to second. And
No, you have your question.
I'll just very briefly, it follows on from RP's commentary, and I look forward to that next report. Ian, I'm just looking at that establishment of the call centre thing, and this is an issue that particularly affected me. And I'm looking at the start point of that being the 6th of April was the commencement of the call centre. Is that the fact?
In terms of for the welfare response, so that's people ringing up and being able to get a needs assessor.
Sure, okay.
Yes.
So just that period, I think was 24th of the March was the lockdown period. So we've got that 12-day period where our communications, were somewhat haphazard. So I'd be interested in your assessment of that period. This is about learning from this.
Yeah, sure.
And it's a very unusual circumstances, I appreciate. The other element, if you can come back with that assessment of our local authority response capability internally. From my perspective, there was this, if you like, cone of silence which occurred for one reason or another for every phone point into the local authority. So I'm just keen to know the interconnectedness between the centre and the TAs and how we might improve that going forward.
Right, so yeah, okay. So look, I suppose one of the issues that we had was that we rely on council call centres and the Palmerston North call centre. This building was obviously shut down, so that created issues in terms of just how the whole system worked. And it took a bit of time to work that out. So, I mean, that's a learning for us. The whole call centre and the needs assessment call centre, that is something which, as a debrief point, we're going to focus on.
Good.
But we actually did get something up and running in terms of dealing with people's needs, their immediate welfare needs, pretty quickly, which was pleasing. And we used a local company to do that.
Sure.
So that was that one. With regards to the TLAs, again, sort of similar situation, but we had regular coordination meetings with the controller from the territorial authorities every morning at about, I think it was 7:30 or something, for weeks. So every morning we would have a coordination meeting with them.
No, I appreciate the meetings were taking place. However, I'm particularly interested in the response capacity from the public calling in, and we've got a dispersed array of communication. If we had an earthquake, for example, we want those outliers to be responding, and I'm needing to know that in future those TAs know what they're meant to be doing and have got capacity to do it. I'm a little concerned that when we're centralised, we've removed, if you like, a sense of accountability or response capacity internally.
Yeah, and again, I think the relationship between the Civil Defence Group and the TLAs is up for further consideration as part of the debrief process. We've only just started the debrief process. It's going to take a couple of months to do that. There were some teething issues because this was, again, a response like no other. We would normally expect to get support from outside of the region as well to help with our response, and also probably more from council staff because there was a number of council staff for various reasons weren't available to respond. Plus we had to have people working virtually. So for every person that we had working in the centre, there was about another 10 to 15 working virtually on Microsoft Teams. So yeah, it was challenging. Yeah.
Happy to second, Mr.
I just have before we do a comment. Okay, move second. I'm going to comment. Move second. Do you wish to speak? Do you wish to speak?
Yeah, just pick a title.
Sheriff, you moved.
I just wanted to. Okay.
Sheriff moved, so I'm sorry, I have to go back. Do you wish to speak, Sheriff? That's fine. You second, you don't wish to speak. Martin, you're on.
I just wanted to talk about what RP said and to acknowledge what a burden you carried, Ian, personally, and your team with you.
Yeah.
I think the region owes a great debt of gratitude for all of that work behind the scenes. So thank you on behalf of Hawke's Bay.
Yeah, I wish to speak to Ian. You did a great job, mate. your whole crew did a fantastic job, and the regional council through James and our staff did an absolutely fantastic job. But I want to say another thing too, in respect to some of the comments made by Api, that our community activated, and Wairoa in particular is a standout community that really got in behind this. No one had to tell them; they just did it. The Hiratonga Taiwhenua, the Taiwhenua in Napier, activated. And you can have all central control and you can do all these things, but unless a community does it and gets in behind it like Wairoa did, it won't work. So they did do it, and Tāna Whenua were there, boots and all on this, and more than. But one of the really interesting thing is, and they protected their community so much so that only 8% of Māori got the COVID. So well less than their population. So they moved quick to protect their older people, and they did a phenomenal job. And you can, Ian and his people can only do so much, but if the people living in our communities, small communities and big communities, don't do it, it won't work. So thanks to them as well. Thanks to everyone out there. You did a wonderful job. Thank you, Ian. All those in favour? Aye. It's carried. Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you. Sorry I'm racing you through, but I'm looking at this huge list. So we have item 9, RPC report. Tom, you're going to do that for us?
I'm actually going to get Kerry to come up. I actually
Kerry's going to come up.
Step
Good.
out of that second half of that meeting. So
recommendations from the RPC.
We'll probably take the matter as read mostly. Just as a fun fact, this used to be HBRC's entire planning team right here. I think you wrote a regional plan, didn't you?
We did together.
Once upon a time.
Yep.
It's quite old now. Right, I'll just step you through the paper. This is obviously the recommendations from the RPC meeting. There were a number of items at that meeting, but there were 2 which required decisions from the Regional Planning Committee, being the tank plan change submission and the Tuki, which we're terming plan change 6A, and that's the amendment to table 5.9.1D. Are we happy to have these taken as read, or do we need to go through them?
I think we can take them as read, and we'll go to questions. Questions for Kerry on the paper? No questions? Oh.
Thank you very much. Tom, you could have done it.
We love that.
But not as well as you.
He'll brood on that all day.
Other performance discussion.
Okay, thank you, Kerry. That was good. So no questions. So do we have a mover to accept the recommendations from the Regional Planning Committee?
Oh, this is regional. I don't have the right here.
Martin?
Can't move.
I'll second it, since I think I'm the co-chair there. So, Martin, you have to speak? And neither do I. Are there any other speakers? If not, we'll put the motion. All those in favour? Accept the recommendations? Aye. Against? It's carried. Thank you very much. We will go for notification policy for water bottling. Ian, is Malcolm here? He is. You're on, mate. Well, come on up. We'll do
Perhaps
this.
we could ask Kerry to come back up. That worked really well last time.
Yeah, they're terrified of you, Kerry.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll just do the easy bit, and then Malcolm will answer any questions. I'm not going to go through this paper in any great detail. You've now received it twice, and this is the 3rd time, albeit there have been some slight amendments to the potential options each time. But you will, the basic premises is we asked you to reconsider the policy that was adopted by Council back in 2016 around public notification of all consents for water bottling activities. And you, at the your initial consideration of it, you asked that the views of the Regional Planning Committee be sought, and so that led to a second paper which was presented to this committee a few weeks ago, and I have included in the paper the feedback from the committee. That's essentially paragraph 23 onwards, and in particular paragraph 26. So so I will just highlight some of that feedback because I think you were looking for really a steer from the planning committee, and although the committee wasn't asked to express a formal preference, this is really their feedback has formed the basis of this paper and the again the presentation to you of the three options that are actually in this paper. And I would note, and I know that you've just considered it in the RPC, but that you did also receive a petition from Paul Bailey around water bottling at the start of that meeting that sought that the current policy for all water bottling activities remain in place. So the concerns were really potentially from some of the councillors in particular around the intent of that 2016 policy and the fact that it wasn't intended to catch all beverages listed, just water bottling plants. And so that really became a discussion around the 90% definition of water bottling and 90% of water or water taken from bores for water bottling, and whether or not that was actually appropriate or could be adjusted. There was certainly concern expressed by members of the Regional Planning Committee around the sustainable use of water for water bottling and a retention of the current policy supported for that reason. But then it was also noted that actually in the particular case that we're looking for some direction from, which has driven the request for some direction, they're not looking for extra water. There isn't any water available in any event, and they're just looking for an adaptation to their product range based on their existing water take. So, Mr Chair, the three options that are now being put back to the Council are to retain the current approach, that is, publicly notify all consents for water bottling. Option 2 is to amend the definition of water bottling to be where the water content of the container is more than 99%. And in the Regional Planning Committee paper, you'll recall there were some descriptions there about some comparative products and their water content. And the third is option 3, which is actually to keep the public notification requirement for any new water bottling activities, but to leave discretion with consent staff to consider public notification requirements where it's just an amendment to an existing water take consent being sought. So those are the three options. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Right, we're going to go straight to questions on this. And we'll keep it to questions because this is reasonably controversial. So we'll keep debate after we've moved. So questions?
I've got a question.
Yes, Jeff.
Is there nowhere a definition in legislation that determines water bottling? Are we making that determination here by saying it's 90, it's 99, or it's whatever it is? Just a piece of letters?
That's correct. There's nowhere in the Resource Management Act that defines water bottling.
Supplementary question, if I may. Is there anywhere in any acts that defines water bottling other than the RMA?
I don't think in any act. There might be definitions you could find elsewhere in other regions who are discussing the same issue.
Putting water into a bottle.
You have a question, Neil?
I've got a question, Mr Chair.
Yes, Neil?
Can you tell me if options 2 and 3 are compatible, so that is it possible that we could promote or consider adopting option 2 and option 3?
Yes, I don't see them being mutually exclusive, Councillor. I think that they are potentially compatible, yes.
They are. Great.
Just on the two options there, if option 3, a question, essentially existing water users and new applicants, if that was to come into play, can that be tested on fairness, on equity, because you are an existing take has an advantage over a new applicant, doesn't define the outcome, but it just says actually they've got one more option than a new applicant to take water. So A, is that correct? And B, is that open to be tested or challenged in court?
I suppose it is open to be tested if someone shows. The situation with someone who's got an existing consent is that they've sort of demonstrated and justified the access to that resource, basically answered the questions of effects on the environment. So they're then asking for a change to the purpose to which they've described that they're going to use the water for. Someone coming in afresh would be looked at in their entirety, not strictly for the water bottling aspect, but for everything that they're proposing to do, because they're new. In the tank context, we're basically in a position where no one can come in to ask for new water because we've determined it's fully allocated. So it could only really occur somewhere else in the catchment or in the region where there is water available.
Yeah, I understand that. But someone using water now for some other purpose takes so much, may say, actually, no, we now like to apply for water bottling for some reason. So they're at a slight disadvantage than some incumbent player. So basically your option 3 is a kind of a pragmatic solution to the challenge that was presented to us a wee while ago, and to try and adhere to public concern about expansion or the ongoing debate about water bottling, regardless of the merits of it. Is that
Correct,
kind of a
and
fair
if
commentary?
if you have a concern about potential fairness, I mean, you could always either now or at some point in the future direct us in terms of, well, it's only if they want to use no more than, for example, 20% of their current take, rather than someone has an existing take and now all of a sudden they want to use 99% of it for water bottling, So you could put some parameters around it as well to address that potential concern.
It's an elegant solution. Anyway, yes, you're on.
Yeah, kia ora. Kia ora, Liz and Malcolm. Liz, I've got a couple of questions. The first one is, so what was the preferable option sort of recommended from the RPC?
Morning, Councillor. No, there wasn't one. It was actually an information paper, and we just sought feedback.
And in the report, what was sort of the consensus on feedback?
There wasn't really any consensus. In paragraph 26 of the report here, it was really, I went back and reviewed the webcast of the meeting or of that particular item, just to sort of pull out the points that were made around the water bottling. So 26.1 to 26.5 are really the key points of feedback.
Okay. And what was discussed was option 1?
There was 5 options presented to the Regional Planning Committee.
Yeah, they're back up at 4.
But option 1 was talked about in the paper that you have in front of you.
Oh, yes, it was.
Yeah. The most. Okay, and then the second thing is that I think you, Liz, asked us what we think our public perception of beverage bottling is. Do you remember that? Was it you, sorry, Liz, or was it someone else presenting the paper?
I was presenting the paper.
Yeah.
It may be me.
So I suppose I just reflected back on that because based on Paul Bailey's paper that he produced and his 1,200 signatories that wanted us to keep the status quo and stay with option 1, and 400 of those being Hawke's Bay residents. Is that was the sort of answer you're looking for, the public perception based on evidence like that?
I think it's trying to understand what are the public concerns versus and matching that up with what we can actually manage through the Resource Management Act itself, because some of those public concerns are not issues that are able to be managed through either a consent process or even a regional plan, such as the destination of any exports and the type of container that's included or that the water is put into. So it was really trying to get an understanding of what those concerns are and therefore how we may be able to ameliorate those or not.
Yeah, sorry, one last bit was, how do you think possibly public perception is based on option 2 and 3?
I'm guessing I'm asking the council to assess that. We certainly, in terms of option 3, I think it does give you an opportunity to look at any new takes. And I think that probably there's some public perception that may have been surprised around the amount of water that's in some of the other products, and therefore may have questioned the equity of the current policy.
Okay, thank you.
Any question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One question arising out of Councillor Foss's question: would a change of use from irrigating vegetables or crops to water bottling be a change of conditions within the remit under option 3 for the council, or would it be a change to conditions? So where would that live? A change of use? That would be a new. Would that be a new water bottling take? I mean, that's how I'd read it. But
yeah, case by case, doesn't it?
But I just need to know which side of the line that's proposed to fall under option 3.
My thought for option 3 would be that would be a change of condition. So
Really?
so you've got a so the purpose would be changing from irrigation to water bottling.
And under option 3, that would go to staff.
Potentially.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions. So first of all, as a representative of the iwi members of the RPC and attendance at the last RPC meeting, it's unfortunate that we didn't provide collectively really clear direction to the staff at that meeting. However, my conversations with those iwi groups, their position collectively is pretty clear, and they do have a preference for option 1. Currently, given public interest on the matter, the fallback or I guess last safety position was that public notification component. So from the collective iwi perspective, there is a preference for option 1.
Is that a question?
I'm getting to the question, but I just wanted to answer the fact.
You're cunning.
Well, a statement was made earlier on that there was no direction, and I'm thinking, well, actually...
At the time, there wasn't.
Correct. So I thought...
At the time, there wasn't.
Okay, so that's that. So the current premise, coming back to my question, getting there, thank you for your patience. I have a concern, and so I personally have a preference for option 3. I think it's pragmatic, as mentioned before. I think there are concerns around public transparency and how do we protect our staff, particularly.
Question?
And so I'm looking at the current premise of the over-allocated aquifer, and it appears to me that the current premise is how can we provision for a business to diversify their product offerings, water-related, and maximise the use of any consent provisions, versus how we are looking to our industry and businesses and on how any expansion might reduce their demand on the aquifer and the supplementing of pumping. So my question is, how are we encouraging, this paper for me and where we're heading, how are we encouraging the change in operational reality for some of our businesses out there? Our rural, our communities and economies, our urban environments to improve their current practice rather than change their practice so that they can have full 100% access to their consent conditions. That is not immediately implied, but there's a concern there for me. So how are we addressing, is that a concern, and how are we addressing that? Would that fit within option 3?
I think if the council was to choose option 3, I think there probably are a number of subsidiary questions that would be raised about how this would could be applied in practice, and it's possible that we could, further refine the guidance that's given from council to staff on how they manage any requests that might come through.
If I could just answer that, I think, so within Tank, there's an implied point that we're going to reduce everybody's water, and so that by doing that in terms of the market, we're forcing people to rethink how they use their water, because we want people to use less water, not just the irrigators, but it's quite hard, I guess, for these people that are making fruit juices, because they'll have a set thing. But it is implied that we do want everybody to start thinking, including people in the towns, how they use their water, because we are very poor users of water right through the entire area, and that includes people who live in Havelock North and irrigators, although irrigators have got a lot better. So we want people to think about, and some of it we're going to do by regulation, and some of it we're going to do by encouragement. And it's not in here, but it's definitely within Tank. If there's nobody else got any questions, I want to move option 3. Do I have a second?
Mr. Chair, I wonder whether you could consider moving options 2 and 3 together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm very happy to do that.
I'm happy to
if
second
that could be, you'll be second that, so we move both. So you can handle that. We can handle that. 3 and 4, 4 and
2 and 3.
Okay.
Option 2 and option 3.
Yeah. Listed as 4 and 5 here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I have a seconder. I just want to talk to this. I mean, we have been searching for a way to get through this, because we didn't want more water bottling plants, and nobody, and very few people in Hawke's Bay, there's some who do, but very few people in Hawke's Bay wanted more water bottling plants. And so the previous council, which I was the chair, was one of our first moves in the first 100 days. We put on the table that we wanted this to stop, and this is the way we did it. And I don't know where the 90 figure came from, but it was just plucked out of the air. That's where it came from. And we achieved our objectives, because if you want a water bottling plant, you've got to apply for a notifiable consent, and it would have made it quite a high hurdle, and there was been no previous water bottling consent. And you've got to remember, there was heaps of them coming in those first few months. Every man and his dog wanted a water bottling consent, and they were just pouring at us. So it had to stop, and we did stop it. But in doing that, we weren't aware that that 90% precluded other businesses who have a high degree of water content, including some vegetables. And I think that's a very interesting question, because if someone wanted to move their vegetables across, they are using a lot of water for that. But certainly, the list of when we did the list, and so we couldn't have a Coca-Cola come along here and said they wanted to set up a factory and employ 3,000 people, we wouldn't be able to, and they had consent already, we wouldn't be able to have them. So there was a component in the laws as we put them down that didn't make any sense. This option says that we retain option 1. So we retain it. If you want to set up a water bottling plant, you have to go for notifiable consent. But it gives the staff the ability to be able to say, if someone comes to us and said, look, I'm going to do a product which is over the 90%, might be 93, 95, 90, up to 99 now we're saying, you can do that within your existing consent. So it's just sensible. For me, it's a very elegant option, and it wasn't put on the table, so I don't know why it didn't turn up. Some bright spark.
Didn't think about it soon enough.
Didn't think about it soon enough. So I think this is an elegant solution which does retain, if you want to set up a water bottling plant, you still got to go for notifiable consent. But if you have an existing business and you're doing something within that business, you can do it up to the 99. So I think this is a good solution. Neil? Do we have any other speakers? Sorry, Martin.
Yeah. There must be other people who want to speak, but I had a starting position with this that, much as I personally don't have a great deal of, I've got no agenda here. I've got no great passion for water bottling. I've got no great sympathy for the proposition that you wrap our precious resources up in plastic, export them offshore without a royalty or any comeback to the wider community beyond the business concerned. That just doesn't excite me at all. But my starting proposition from, I guess, a resource management purist perspective was option 5 of the previous paper, which was to revert back to the standard tests in the Act. And if it has a more than minor effect on the water resource, it's notified, and if it doesn't, it's not. I very deliberately bit my tongue in the RPC meeting because I felt my duty in that meeting was to listen and to hear the voice of the tangata whenua. And I heard very clearly what Api shared with us before. But that concern to me really went to the core issue of the sustainability of the water resource. And to me, that is an issue that is addressed through tank. And there's no more water. And so I encourage the 1,200 petitioners to make a submission to tank. Test the proposition. If you're that hot about it, put in a submission that water bottling is prohibited or non-complying. Put in a submission that there's a rule in the regional plan that requires these activities to be notified. But this is a shorthand way of going about the job. I don't think the policy is robust. I don't think, and frankly, I don't think it's lawful. You are encouraging people through a notification test to make submissions about what the paper tells us is actually irrelevant under the Act. So all of the concerns I just shared with you about my personal predilections, if I'm sitting here as chair of the hearings committee, I've got to ignore them. And I think that's a fraud. I think you're asking people to have their applications notified so that people can make submissions to the hearings committee, which we're going to have to ignore. And I don't think that's honest. So if you've got a concern about water bottling, that 1,200 people, go to Wellington and start talking to them about royalties, start talking to them about what we're putting all of products across our economy in, namely plastic, and deal with it there. Submit to tank and deal with it honestly in tank. So I don't think this policy achieves any of that. I think essentially what we're doing is applying a selective handbrake on businesses based on our own personal predilections without a valid resource management pretext, and I'm not happy about doing that in a post-COVID situation. If we're going to handbrake business, it's got to be for a legitimate resource management purpose, and I don't think this policy achieves that. So I have all of that bubbling around in my head with this very strong recommendation from the RPC, and quite frankly, I'm struggling with it, as you can probably hear. So I don't think any of these options is the right solution. I think option 5 of the previous paper was the most honest solution, and we deal with this as a council through Wellington and lobbying Wellington, and we deal with it through tank. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Martin. Any other speakers? Mike?
Yes, look, I just want to support Martin there. Tangata whenua, mana whenua's position in regards to water bottling has been one that it should have been a consented process. Just straight as that, without adding the complexities around the percentage. I do take note that many of the water bottling consents that were granted were not notified. A lot of those decisions were made in-house by council staff, which caused a lot of the issues to start with.
All of them were not notified.
as I just said, the vast majority, wasn't quite too sure it was all of them, and so that's where that angst started from, because the public felt that they were denied the opportunity to become part of the process, to be able to comment on the fact that individuals were using a resource that they felt belonged to the community, was put into basically private ownership. That's where this notified question actually stems from. It is from that. And I do agree with Martin, there's a bigger question here, and you've heard me say it before around water. And this council needs to grapple with that bigger question around water and take that question to Wellington. I don't see the solution within these three recommendations. Kia ora.
Any other speakers? Well, we do have a motion on the table, and I'm going to have to put it and just see how it flies. All those in favour of option 2 and 3 being combined?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Anyone?
1, 2, 3. So it's carried.
It's carried. Gee whiz. Well, I think we better raise our hands though. All those in favour? Just do a check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Against? Against?
Okay, yeah.
3.
Thank you very much. It's carried. Right, we're going to break for lunch. It's 5 to 1, and we won't get through anything, so time.